Hello, and welcome to Chess Comedy Books 50. Since I've just reached my half century, what I thought I'd do is dedicate the whole chinwag to looking at the games, or the life, or a bit of both, or my reaction to the life and the games of Robert James Fischer. Bob Fischer, to my generation, was the greatest player of all time. And I say with Bill Hartson in this as in so much else, that if anybody attempts to tell you that Fischer isn't the greatest player of all time, agree with them rather than just sit there arguing. His influence on the game, particularly from an English perspective, was just astronomical. And if you look through, this is his Annus Mirabilis of 1972, which I remember. There's no point in saying as if it was yesterday, because it wasn't yesterday. If you look through the game, the magazines, you will see his very, very strong influence coming out. And here he is in green. And as you can see, the Bobby who ended up in a jail in Japan and having his face literally kicked in and broken teeth and long hair and all looking wild, and was a world away from this businessman whom we are prone to call genius. Look, just look. The chess match of the century. What do you think that was? Boggs versus Snoggs? It was important. It was what counted. Of course it was what counted. It electrified the game. Here's Spassky taking it to siege in Olympiad. Look how troubled he looks. I think that before Reykjavik, Boris just wanted out. It's not that he didn't want to play Bobby, and it's not that he didn't want to defend his title, that he was frightened. I don't think he was frightened. He just didn't want the hassle. Playing Fischer was a terrible upheaval, because anything but anything could happen, including defaulting the second game as Bobby did. If you look at the cartoons that came out, and there were lots, all worth collecting even now. There's Fischer dominating Boris, the various guys. Here's Lombardy here. Fischer's behavior was utterly appalling away from the board. People said that, he did it deliberately to put Spassky off. No, he didn't. In truth, he was putting himself off. In truth, he couldn't help it. Here we are, the world's title match. And there's Bobby, crouched over the board. Yeah. This is the British Chess Magazine for 1972. Believe you me, that's why this volume sold out. Never before has chess received a sharp prod in the arm as this. Here is an early book about Bobby. And on the back, surprisingly, is a picture of not of Bobby, but of the author, Frank Brady. Well, Dr. Brady, as I'm sure he is, from the Brady Bunch. No, not from the Brady Bunch. Wrote this book, and he has been dining out on Bobby's life ever since. Profile of a Prodigy. And it contains some early efforts by Bobby. And fairly crude, but I mean, he was writing about a teenager biography. For example, here we are. The notes are not too bad. Nobody for 1 minute is suggesting that these are definitive. And this takes us up until, forgive me, I don't know, 1964. So Bobby had played in a couple of interzonals probably, and, already was throwing a fit, or, blaming the Russians and saying they were cheated and everything, which there was a degree, probably still is on certain levels, of collaboration. Here we have the life and games of Bobby. This is a long time before Bobby wrote, as we'll come on to discuss and look at, 60 memorable games. This is Brady's biography. And in writing that, having access to the young Bobby and his family, I'm sure Brady did very well financially out of it, and richly deserved to do so. Here's a book by fellow US GM Edmar Mednes, How to Beat Bobby Fischer. Now, as you know, beating Bobby Fischer is about as easy as climbing a mountain. And but the notes, though brief, in certain cases, I was going to say completely brief, but it's not really. But he shows you all the games he lost. He's been playing Smyslov. There's no photographs, but it's quite a nice little book. I've always got time for Mednes, same as I have with Soltis. Since their names sound the same, I sort of ran them into one in my head. Completely ridiculous. Of course, there's no connection, but they're both very good writers. Mednes is dead now, and Soltis is still with us, but all of that aside. Despite the valuable analysis in the book, there are decidedly no miracles to be hoped for in playing one or another style against the champion. No miracles that perhaps, just perhaps, skill, study, and determination will do it. They have done it before. Oh yes, good luck. I'll leave that too, says Robert Byrne. And believe you me, he and his brother Donald had some interesting games against Bobby, didn't they? Now, here's a book that appeared long after Reykjavik 72. And this book is fantastic. If you didn't pick up on it at the time, well, now's your chance, because I expect it's still around somewhere. This book came out in 2004, and I couldn't believe it. It blew me away. It talks about Bobby's life, but it does it from different angles. There's a few photographs here. That's Bob Finnick playing Tau. You wouldn't have expected to have seen that. But he gives a background, and why not? There we are. Very orderly compared to Reykjavik. And also Karpos match against Korchnoi when Korchnoi was a defector of 1978. Here's Bobby with Erva. And he got the medal. I think he said something to the effect that it's a bit small or something. And anyway, there you are. Erva must have been, though he was pleased, he was also enormously relieved. This is a very good background to the match. I think it's probably the best one I know. The new book by Donaldson I haven't even seen, let alone read, and I will be getting it. Of course I will. But the fact remains, this cannot be missed. Now, from a book that can't be missed to a book that can be missed. This is not quite a pot boiler, but it is shows early Bobby games and games from Simmels. For example, there he is playing at Los Angeles, 1961. Nothing has been omitted that they could find that hadn't been said already. And this is Donaldson, who in the end wrote the big book, which, as I said, I haven't got yet. No. I'm afraid I think a lot of this is just padding, but here's Bobby appearing in I've Got a Secret. And his secret was that he was Jewish. He looks happy there. He's won a flight bag or something. Or maybe it's a bag to put record player in. These ways, he would have been worth it, wouldn't he? He was US champion at 15. And here he is winning the US championship when but a kid. Despite the fact that with Reshevsky, Sherwin, Lombardi, Berliner, world correspondence champion, Denker, Mednis, Sydney Bernstein, Biscaya, you name it. Bobby swept the board. Here's a picture of Bobby playing a game that isn't chess, but they don't specify what it is. Could be Monopoly, I suppose. What do you think? I think they should put it on a table and not crane their necks. There we are. And there's Bobby. Now, the next book is well worth acquiring still, and in hardcovers. I got this book nearly 50 years ago. It's one of my last remaining ones from school days. My mother bought me this, and it's really nice. It's the games of Bobby Fischer. It's the complete games, right up until Fischer Spassky of 1972. There are games which have appeared since in one form or another. There's Leonard Barden looking over Tal's shoulder, and there's Tal looking at Ullman, who's playing Fischer. But this is published by Batsford's, and it has contributions by Biscaya and Golombek, and they certainly wax eloquent. And all the praise comes out for Bobby's genius, all of which, at least in my opinion, is justified. Here he is playing in the Rapid Transit, which was his last practice before Reykjavik, I think. He'd just beaten Petrosian in the candidates final. Let me give you an example of what I mean. They give the cross table, and then some of the games are unannotated. You must remember this is long before databases existed. And then if there's a game, particularly if it's not being looked at in 60 memorable games, or they feel there's something they can add, or something which has been omitted, or something that they know a lot more about than your average, and where Fischer's concerned, there's a lot to know. They go into some detail in each of the chapters. The world title series, they're talking about the problem that Bobby didn't actually qualify for the 1970 interzonal, and FIDE bent the rules and said, well, if Benko, who had qualified along with Reshevsky and Addison from the USA, if Benko would give up his place, and a few dollars were offered, Fischer could actually take the place. And that's what happened, and it opened the door to so much and so much. And I love the statement simply of Botvinnik when he said, chess is moving ahead. Well, it did move ahead, didn't it? And I think chess is moving ahead again, thanks to such books as Game Changer and all the young people taking up the game. Here's Bobby playing in the World Team Championships, the Olympiad, and he's lost to Spassky. It's only one game, but nevertheless, it must have hurt him a lot. He wheeled out the Grunfeld, which Boris would have been prepared for. And the various tournaments he played in the run-up to the World Championship, not just qualifiers, but also practice, all of which took place on his side of the Atlantic. When he played Petrosian, to get Petrosian to come, as Capablanca and Alekhine did, to Buenos Aires, was quite an achievement in itself. And at the start, Tigran looked like he was holding Bobby. He won an early game, didn't he? And Fischer just smashed him in the second half. And it must have been a bitter pill to swallow for an ex-world champion to just be knocked aside, particularly as it looked in the early games that if he grit his teeth and perhaps held his breath, he would stodge Fischer, not to death, but to a standstill, I think you could say. Fischer's medical condition was probably better in a short-term match than it was in the 21 games against Boris Spassky. That's the point. Fischer wasn't well. I think because he was young, he could hide it. And as the years gained on him, he simply couldn't. I don't think there was anywhere left to hide. To call him a hermit, you can call him a genius, you can call him any word in the dictionary. But we should be, as chess players, grateful to him. Here's Bobby in 1965, Capablanca Memorial. The reason this is famous is because of the Cuban crisis. As a result of this, Bobby didn't actually travel to Cuba at all. He played by telex from telegraph from the USA. They sort of make that out to be a sign of eccentricity, but I mean, if he wanted to play, and that's the only route he had to attendance, then I think he did awfully well. I mean, it's only the same nowadays as playing by telephone. People do sometimes, don't they? Or playing online, as we, because of the lockdown, have become obliged to do. It may very well be that subsequently people will like it and like it. But at the moment, from 1965, it was the only time that this happened, Bobby played. Whereas the rest of them were all in one room in Cuba. You understand, Bobby was in the US. Here's Fischer squaring up to Tal and Gligrich. That's here at 1959. Bobby was 16. And despite that, and all the players, I'm sure, right down to the bottom, Swiss national masters, a little more, they were much more experienced than he was. But despite that, came third. Now, here are two copies of a most beloved book, of course. This is quite rare, this edition, at least in England, in Europe. This is one of the editions of my Upside Down games, my 60 memorable games. And this takes us from, this is by Bobby Fischer. And it takes us from his game against Jim Sherwin, right up till 1967. So it covers a decade of his career. It has introductions by Larry Evans, which makes people think that Larry Evans wrote the whole book. Well, Larry Evans was a good player, and he was a good author, even though latterly he was a bit of a careless journalist. But Larry Evans did not write this book. I'm sorry, he didn't. He wrote the introductions, and I'll show you by what I mean by that. Here's the game against Walter, and heading they headed up, and here's Bobby writing the notes. And here, Fischer thanks him as colleague, friend, and grammarian, and by that he means that he had gone through the text. Bobby did this on tape. He would, say that what he wanted to do, and he would speak it into a tape, and it would be played back on reels, I'm sure. The introductions are fairly pacey and a bit slangy, but the fact remains that 60 games by Fischer, including 3 losses and like 4 draws or something, it was unprecedented at the time. The review sort of said, well, surely this can't be happening. Well, it was happening, and Bobby, unlike Alekhine, put everything, as Cromwell said, warts and all. Here he is playing Tau. The old-fashioned slugfest. And it was a French defence. I have a feeling that they perhaps agreed to play this game. Peter Clark in BCM, no one picked up on this, said that the whole game was theoretical, which is a kind way of saying that both players knew all the moves right to the end, even though a perpetual check in desperation emerged. Here he is. As you can see, all the top games are here. Here he is playing Petrosian, went on to become world champion in 63, as mentioned. In 71, Bobby beat Petrosian, who was seeded into the candidates, and as a result, earned the right to play Boris Spassky. Here we are in a favourite of Bobby's, Exchange Lopez. There we are, a position which a number of opening buffs will know. Note the double pawn here, but he's given up the bishop pair, and he's got rapid development here. There we are. I think you can clearly see that. And look at the depth of commentary there. Well, as I say, this is the American edition. Unfortunately, it's got an ink, it's got a blemish here. Otherwise, this might have been quite valuable. I bought it in a charity shop for £2. And here it is in the Faber edition. I bought this in Oxford, I think for about £5 some years back. Sadly, the shop and so many other bookshops have closed subsequently. I don't know if this is a first edition. Yes, it is. From 1969. That is a second. This is a reprinting, so I suppose this would be now quite valuable. It might be worth £70–80, but I mean, I'm not going to get rid of it, so it doesn't matter what price, so daft price has appeared. It doesn't have cross tables. It doesn't have photographs, but it has love and it has character, and it was unique. There's nothing been like it before or since. Bobby called a spade a shovel. Here he is playing against Botvinnik, a game which ran and ran. Look at this, look at this. You don't have depth of calculation like that. This is a game which Botvinnik said in drawing it, which he did, meant more to him than regaining the world title against Town, which he did. It was a shame Botvinnik was due to play a match against Fischer at Leiden in 1970. And I think Botvinnik would have been absolutely smashed. But I do think that the match would have been interesting. And if it had been only, say, 4 or 6 games, I think the old Bernard Kafty never failed to call him patriarch of Soviet chess, would have had his dignity intact. He may have won the odd game. He certainly would have held on to some draws. But by and large, Bobby would have smashed through, particularly with white. But we'll never know. The match wasn't contested. This contains simul games. This contains one blitz game. Again, this is unheard of. You wouldn't have got that against Reuben Fine. Dr. Fine had retired from chess long before Bobby was born, when Bobby was a child. But he came back as much out of interest as curiosity. I'm sure he was harshly competitive as well. Here's Bobby playing against Korchnoi. See? If you look through the index, you will see just about all the top players mentioned. Botvinnik, Robert Byrne, Erva, Fine, Geller. 4 games against Gligerich. He got on pretty well with Gligerich. There was a rumour, 1973, 1974, that Bobby was going to play a non-FIDE World Chess Federation match. He didn't in the end. And then he was going to play against Mecking, and he didn't in the end. And there was talk that he would play a non-qualification match against Stein. He didn't in the end. In fact, he didn't play against anybody. By that time, I don't think he was in a position to respond. 4 games against Reshevsky, obviously a bit of needle because they were both Americans. 3 games against Tao, and so on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have come full circle. We are back where we started with Bobby. When he died, it was so sad. I got an email from a friend in New Zealand, obviously they're ahead of us on the clock, saying, did I know that Bobby Fischer had passed away? And I didn't. And I stayed late. I could have gone into work, but I didn't. I stayed at my computer and wrote a little obit, and it became clear that the news was true. Bobby died at 64, and they made something of the fact that that was the number of squares on the board, which is as flippant as it is ridiculous. But nevertheless, the obituaries spoke of, he was a hermit and he was this and he was that. But the fact remains is we owe him everything. And to my generation, we owe him everything. And Karpov and Kasparov, who was to follow, obviously they owed him a very great deal. And both of them, and players today as well, will know, as we know, say, if we're writing and speaking, that we owe so much to, say, Shakespeare. Well, we owe a lot to Bobby Fischer. Not everything, but a very great deal. Well, this has been Chess Comedy Books 50, and we have attained our half century. Who better to mention than Robert James Fischer? I've been James Pratt, and you haven't. Goodbye.